Today we've got a great malicious compliance story involving a major petroleum company. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, passenger abuses me, the bus driver? Enjoy walking 4 kilometers home? I'm a bus driver. Passengers have to press a stop button if they want the bus to stop at the next stop. Pressing the stop button flicks on a huge banner on the front of the bus, along with making a loud buzz. There are multiple stop buttons on the bus. The condition of buses are quite bad here. Some of the stop buttons are faulty. It's usually not a big deal as passengers can see if the banner is flicked on, and if it's not, the passenger can just press another button or verbally tell me to stop. However, it just doesn't register with some passengers that there is a huge, visible, and audible banner. Unfortunately, these same passengers tend to lose their minds easily. It was 9:30 p.m. and I was driving between 2 large suburbs, let's call them Sunnydale and Riverdale. A passenger must have pressed the stop button, but it didn't register on the banner. As I drove past the stop, he yelled, "Oi, you freaking dog runt! You missed me stop, jerk!" I apologized and tried to explain to him that the button must have been faulty and that I would drop him at the next stop. I told him that I could not drop him off on the side of the road because I would get in trouble from the bus company, as they have GPS tracking whenever I open the bus door. The passenger just yelled, "Stop talking crap and open the door, you racist comment." I stopped at the next stop, about 500 meters ahead. But the passenger yelled, "Just go to Riverdale, mate, I ain't walking." Now, what the passenger didn't know was that since Sunnyvale was a bigger town, the last bus from Sunnydale to Riverdale was later than the last bus from Riverdale to Sunnyvale. He would be stranded at Riverdale, 4 kilometers away from his stop. So I kept driving to Riverdale, as the passenger requested. I dropped him and the other passengers off and closed the door. I could see him checking the posted timetable on the bus stop. I put my bus into gear and pulled out. I heard him exclaim, "Hey, wait!" as I did so. Unfortunately, I could not have dropped him back to his stop even if I wanted to. I have a strict schedule and change route numbers after each trip. My schedule now was to fill up the bus with diesel and head back to the depot. I filled up my bus and headed back to the bus depot. As I drove back, I saw him walking on the side of the road, from 500 meters to 4,000 meters. Considering this story definitely took place in Australia, I wonder what the weather was like on that nice 4-kilometer walk. I doubt there's too much availability in a place like that for something like Uber. Our next story is Shelly's seafood restaurant. Don't mess with the waitress. Near my former place of work was an excellent seafood place named Shelly's. Far better than you would expect from the average strip mall outside. They made amazingly good food. The pasta jambalaya, shrimp louis, and lobster roll were particularly good. And lunch was reasonably cheap, usually $15 with tip if you stayed on the lunch menu. Unlimited bread rolls ensured you would not go hungry, and they were dang good too. One of the waitresses though, well, she could be a little trying. Must have been over 70, a former smoker, and she took 2 to 3 breaths to ask you, "What you want to drink?" And a little hard of hearing, a challenge for my soft-spoken Australian expat coworker. But she was a fixture, so you bit your tongue and you knew the chef would lay a little extra on your plate, and sometimes free dessert, Boston cream pie house-made. Except the Karens, who complained and laughed behind her back and went to the manager, also an owner, to ask to be reseated. Of course, let me show you to the patio. Well, Jimmy and I exchanged a look because we know the patio is only open for dinner. 15 minutes later, they stormed back in to complain that no one came to take their order and they had to head back to the office. And what was he going to do about it? Most people take the hint, lady. Speechless, they sputtered and left. Meanwhile, our waitress wandered by with free pie and the check. "Anything else, boys?" "We're good, Shelly, thanks for the pie." "You boys be good. See you next week." And then she wandered off, still working in the restaurant she started 60 plus years ago, now run by her son, the manager, at the time of the incident. P.S. Just before COVID, Shelly passed away from emphysema-related problems, 89, working in her restaurant she opened with her husband at age 19, and worked there for 70 years. Her son took over as manager, but she still showed up to work every day, working the lunch hour, sometimes early dinner if she felt good. Wife and I celebrated many events there over the years, including her telling me she was pregnant after 3 years of trying and a miscarriage. Shelly was there for more than a few lunches and dinners. My mate from Australia chipped in to buy her flowers for the funeral when I told him. I mean, unless you have like a very legitimate complaint. If you're going to such an obviously family-run restaurant and you're trying to complain, you're probably just gonna keep yapping to their backup. You're just a Karen crying for help, but you're crying to your enemy's reinforcements. Our next story is, okay, I'll let you speak. So this happened a good like 7 to 8 years ago. I used to work on a help desk. We had recently switched a major software to a new one. They didn't want to train us on that system, so they paid for a third-party desk to deal with those calls. When you called, it was a phone tree that basically said to press 1 for the new software or press 2 for any other issues. If you pressed 2 and had issues for line 1, we had to transfer you. We had no training, access, and the contract stipulated it as well, so no way to help you in any way. Things are different now, but that was the deal at that point. So this user calls us, I get her information, and proceeds to immediately tell me that she is having an issue with the system. I try to interrupt her politely, and she cuts me off and proceeds to yell into the phone, "How dare you! You do not interrupt me! That is rude and you will let me finish!" I said nothing and let her talk. She proceeds to talk for a full 5 minutes. I timed her, giving me the full rundown of her issues in excruciating detail. She finally finished. I let there be a pause where she goes, "Hello?" Both to annoy her a bit and to make sure she actually is done. I put on my AAA triple plus customer service voice and ask if she is done, as I didn't want to interrupt her again. I then explained sweetly and politely, "I'm sorry, I was trying not to waste your time early when I tried to interrupt. This is the wrong line for the system, and I was trying to get you to the correct line so they could help you. I need to transfer you." Just oozing all the, "I was just trying to help you," I could. There was no sound coming from the phone, but I could feel the red-hot rage and embarrassment coming through the phone as I transferred her to the correct line. I genuinely believe most people that work in a field like this just don't get paid enough to deal with people like that anyways. Best kind of treat them like a toddler and let them tire themselves out before you deal with them. As long as it doesn't hurt your metrics too much if it's a place focused on that, honestly makes your job a little bit easier. You get to burn 5 minutes. Our next story is, oh, I'm supposed to sit all day? Bet. I'm returning from time off due to surgery. A doctor's note says I can sit, so my boss said to take one to register and use it as needed. I've been back and forth all day doing other light things with zero problem. A fellow manager came in, older, kinda has an attitude, and yelled at me in front of our team member on the floor because I was putting a couple of skeins of yarn away. Yarn that weighs a total of £1 for the package. She doesn't want to work more hours for me, which I get, but I'm not incapable. So for the rest of the day, I've been sitting in my chair at register, standing only to help customers. She came up and got mad that I was sitting, so I just looked innocent and said, "You told me to sit, so I am. You can take it up with our boss then." And she stormed off. Honestly, I think in general, people at registers should be allowed to sit as long as they can do their whole job. Not that it matters more and more as time goes on, it seems like we're all switching to self-serve checkout. This next story is original or effects. About 6 months ago, I got a referral from my doctor to a medical clinic to check on a minor thing that he was not worried about but was bothering me. He wrote out the referral but couldn't refer me anywhere specific. I did some research online and found a clinic near my house. I followed their process to book an appointment and sent a picture of the referral using their online form. It took 5 months for them to find any availability, but I finally got an appointment. But after 6 months, I couldn't find the referral form anywhere. Knowing that if I started from scratch, it would take another 6 months to get an appointment, I decided to chance it. Somewhat predictably, as soon as I got to the office, they asked for the referral form. I asked them if they had the copy I sent in with the appointment request. They did, but this was not sufficient because it was an electronic copy. And I quote, "Appointments can only be held if we have the original referral or the doctor's office faxes it to us." I stared at the receptionist for a moment or two, dumbfounded by such a stupid policy. Then I asked for 10 minutes to work this out. I hustled out to my car and called my doctor's office. I got the receptionist and explained the situation. Then I grabbed a copy of the picture I had taken of my referral form, the one that they had already had, and emailed it to her. She confirmed she would fax it to the clinic right away. I went back into the clinic and could barely suppress my smirk. I told the receptionist that there should be a fax for my doctor's office. As soon as she received it, she compared it to the picture she already had. "But this is the same picture that we already have." I say yes, but it was faxed from my doctor's office like you requested. Slow Pikachu face for her, big smirk for me. She called over the supervisor, who cracked up and said okay. I got into my appointment, and it turns out my doctor was right. It was nothing, but I do have my pride at outsmarting their stupid system. Like, I get it, there is an importance to have your paperwork, but honestly, in 2024, why is digital not sufficient enough? Unless this is some kind of ironclad paperwork that you need to see like the ink dried on the paper. Our next story is, everyone got mad because I took charge when no one else would? Sure, I let them dig their own grave. About 14 years ago, I went to work for a major petroleum company in Indianapolis. Over my 4 years there, I applied myself and gained enough knowledge to be more knowledgeable than the most senior guy. Well, one day, stuff hit the fan and we were looking at a potentially major spill because the packing in a pump had failed. Nobody was doing anything, and I'm a take charge kind of guy, so I started barking orders. Now, you have to understand this would have been an EPA nightmare, so there was no time for niceties. The other employees went and complained, and I was called into the manager's office and was told about the complaints that I just barked orders and didn't ask nicely. He told me that I did the right thing, and that next time, if it wasn't going to be a major issue, to give them enough rope to hang themselves. Bet? So the next time I saw that they had the valve set up in such a way that 2 soap tanks for making asphalt emulsion would overflow, and while not an EPA big deal, it would bring scrutiny from the Health, Environmental, Safety, and Security division of our company, I mentioned to them that they might want to check the valve lineup because something didn't look right. Well, they told me to mind my own business. As it was time for me to go home, I called the manager from my car and said, "You should probably start heading to the terminal because 2 tanks are about to overrun." I tried to tell them, but they told me to mind my own business. I didn't get halfway home before a neighbor to the facility came knocking on the door, saying liquid was overflowing 2 tanks. As the only first responder not involved in the incident, I had to return to the facility and supervise cleanup until the big guns from corporate came in about 3 hours later. All 3 were put on probation and then eventually fired for more screw-ups. The beauty of this was that after that incident, they were told they were to follow what I said explicitly and never again complain that someone doesn't say please and thank you in a crisis. They all hated me until the day they left. Why? Because I was the only person to take charge when no one else would. Honestly, just sounds like a bunch of people who weren't cut out for that line of work. If you're working in some kind of field where there are some dangerous concoctions or massive tanks that you can accidentally overflow if you don't have your crap right, it's probably not going to be all sunshine and daisies the whole time, and you need to be able to handle that. Our next story is, want me to pay out of pocket to take students to the zoo? Okay, but you'll miss out on a killer photo shoot. I'm a teacher. I taught a class of 18 kids back in 2017. The curriculum changed near the end of the school year, and it was expected for the kids to visit the zoo. Admin told me that since their budget was created at the start of the year, they wouldn't pay for the entrance fees and that I would have to pay out of pocket for all 18 kids. They also requested that I take pictures for their school Facebook page. I love my students, but I love my savings too. Not as much as my students, but still. I couldn't justify spending over 360 British pounds on a single non-tangible thing. So I took the kids down to local farmer Pete's farm. All Pete asked for was a €5 donation per person, and that too was voluntary. I put down a £50 note for old Pete and showed the kids exotic animals like cattle, sheep, goats, and chickens. A few weeks later, I was approached by admin. They asked me for the photos. I gladly emailed it to them with a subject title of Petting Zoo Pictures. I got an email back simply saying that my conduct was not exemplary. No reprimand, no written up warning, but no photos for admin too. The kids enjoyed it though. I mean, maybe it's kind of violating policy, but in that situation, would it be that inappropriate for OP to try to talk to their kids and say, okay, go back to your parents and ask them if they want to pay for this trip? I mean, Lord knows, whenever I was in school and there was any kind of field trip, there was definitely some kind of fee that all the kids had to pay. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely awesome malicious compliance story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.